Welcome. We're going to be reviewing our solving inequalities. The important thing to remember when you solve an inequality is that you can treat that just like solving an equation. So if you remember, we did that DCVAM acronym to help us through. D says we're going to start with the distributive property. Note that there are no sets of parentheses in this inequality, so there's nothing to distribute. C says that we're going to combine like terms on individual sides of the equals. Looking on the left side of my inequality symbol here, I have a G term and a constant number term, not like terms, only one term on the right, so we don't have anything to combine there. V stands for move all of your variables to one side. Notice there's only one variable present, so I don't have them on the left and the right. That's already taken care of for us. So then the A gets us to add or subtract as you need to isolate that constant. So we will need to add the 7 to the left and add the same 7 to the right. This results in 3/4 G being less than, and now combine these terms on the right, -4 plus 7 makes 3. Lastly, we're going to multiply or divide in order to isolate our variable. And so note, right now it's 3/4 times G. Whenever you have that invisible multiplication, we normally think about division. However, please note that we can't go ahead and divide by a fraction. We always multiply by the reciprocals. We're multiplying by 4/3, and what you multiply by on one side, we're going to have to multiply by on the other side. Always best to use a fraction in reference to a fraction so we can clearly see the numerators lined up with each other and the denominators lined up with each other. Now, how does this benefit us through the rest of our problem? Well, that 3 numerator and 3 denominator both divide out a common factor of 3, and the 4 numerator, 4 denominator can both divide out the common factor of 4. So G is isolated. This is less than, and then look at our work on the right side. 3 numerator and 3 denominator can cancel each other out when they divide out the 3, so we're left with 4 divided by 1, which would be 4. So here's our solution. G is less than 4. So we're going to go ahead and represent this solution a couple of different ways. First of all, let's put that onto the number line, focusing on 4, label some values above it and below it, and then consider what kind of a point you have to plot at 4 on the number line. This is a less than symbol, so that's going to be an open point. And then we're talking about values that are less than 4. G has to be less than 4. Well, 3 would be less than 4, so we are shading values on top of 3, shading to the left of that value. Now, as for the interval notation, remember, this is going to tell me the start and the stop of my value. So I am starting on the left edge with an arrowhead that points all the way down to the left. That points to negative infinity. Follow it the entire way up to my solution value at 4. And notice that has an open point. Open points are always represented by a parenthesis, as well as the negative infinity is always represented by a parenthesis. Then we also have the set builder notation to discuss. Set builder notation is always going to have the curly braces at its open and close. We introduce what variable we're going to be talking about, variable G in this case. Then you do your vertical bar to indicate that you're done with the introduction and you're ready to get to the solution. Whatever solution it is that you have from your problem is what we're going to fill in. G is less than 4. There you go. Let's try another example. Again, you can treat that inequality symbol the same way that you do a equal sign. And we're going to go ahead and solve. Notice to isolate my variable m right now, it's part of a large division problem, so I'm going to want to clear that fraction. So I'll multiply by the denominator over 1, multiply by that same value of 6 on the other side. This helps my numerator and denominator can divide out that common factor. I've got 4 minus 2m now is greater than 30. Notice next to cancel that coefficient, or excuse me, not the coefficient, we're going to cancel the constant, that 4 that's in the way. Subtract 4 from the left, subtract the same 4 from the right. So negative 2m comes down. This is now greater than 26. And now my coefficient is all that's left in the way of m, so we'll need to divide by negative 2, and once you divide on one side, we'll have to divide on the other side. Note here, dividing by a negative number on both sides is what clues you in that you are going to flip your inequality symbol when you rewrite this. So my m comes down, my greater than symbol has now flipped to a less than symbol, and the 26 divided by -2 leaves us with -13. So here's our solution. We'll go ahead and graph this one on a number line. Label that value and a few others around it. And we're going to decide at that -13 is an open point or a closed point. This ends up being a closed, that's going to be an open point for us. We only have a less than symbol, so we have an open point. And I'm talking about all the values that are less than -13. Well, -15 would be less than -13, so we are shading to the left there. Now to practice with writing our other versions, we're going to write this out in interval notation. So in interval notation, starting on the left side of my number line, that's an arrowhead to the left. That takes me all the way down to -infinity. And remember, curvy infinities always have curvy parentheses with them. Then I put my comma to show where I go all the way up to. What's the farthest to the right that I get? That's my solution value at -13. And based on that point, or based on that inequality symbol, this is not included. An open point gets a parenthesis in that. We go ahead then and start thinking about the set builder notation that we have. For that set builder notation, I'll get my curly braces set up. To open and close, we have to introduce the variable. In this case, it's letter M. Do our vertical bar that's such that to tell us we're done with the introductions and now we're ready to talk about the important stuff. Take that inequality solution and we write it in. M is less than -13. There it is. Let's go for another example now. Again, I'm going to start thinking about those same rules that we did for solving equations. They all come into play here if I think about that DC-VAM process. So D for distribute, and as I go through, 2 times 3W makes it 6W. 2 times +2 makes it +4. Bring everything else down. We haven't used it yet. Then C for combine like terms. When I look on the left side, I've got some like terms as constants, 3 and -11. That makes a -8. Bring down my +2W, keep that less than or equal to, bring down my 6W plus 4. Now, V for variables, get all my variables over to one side. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract my 6W to cancel it on the right, and what I do on one side, I have to do on the other side. So -8 now, and the +2W with -6W leads us to a -4W, less than or equal to now. All I have on the right side remaining is a 4, taking care of the variables. Add and subtract now where you need to in this two-step equation. To cancel that constant, we're going to add 8, and what you add to one side, you have to add to the other. So -4W is less than or equal to 12. All that adding and subtracting are done. Last one, M for multiply or divide. I'm going to have to divide by my coefficient -4, divide by my coefficient -4. And I hope you realize it here, dividing by that negative number on both sides says that we flip the inequality. So as you write your final solution, W is isolated after the coefficient cancels. Instead of a less than or equal to symbol, we now have changed to a greater than or equal to symbol. And do the math. 12 divided by -4 gives us -3. Here's our solution. We're now able to graph this on a number line. So I'll focus on -3, get -2 and -1 around it, along with -4 and -5. And so I select my point to plot on the number line. We're talking about a greater than or equal to symbol. Extra ink to draw that underline. It says extra ink to fill in the point that we plot on the number line because it is included. I'm talking about values that are greater than -3. Find the things that are greater than. Find the values that are taking you towards the positives. Those are clearly going to be greater than a negative, so we're shading to the right here. Now let's go ahead and we'll need to talk about that interval notation for it. Interval notation, remember, is always going to start on the left side of the number line. So as far to the left as you go and find that information. Here we are at -3 for our starting point. Notice -3 has a closed point. Closed points always get a bracket around them. Put your comma in so we're ready to talk about how far we go to the right. This arrowhead is taking me to the right all the way to +infinity. Remember, curvy infinities always get curvy parentheses. Then we also have that set builder notation to discuss. So for set builder notation, get your curly braces set up, introduce the variable that we're talking about, W in this case. Vertical bar tells me I'm done with the introductions. Now we're ready for the important stuff. So W is greater than or equal to -3. One last example for us to explore today. Again, focusing on solving the equation, so I'm going to think about that DC-VAM process. Split your inequality if you need to, and we'll begin with the distributions. -35n plus 42, bring down that minus 6n. On the other side as well, bring down the minus 5n, bring down the plus 6. It's still a greater than or equal to. Distributing done. We're going to combine like terms. Look for what you have as like terms, a -35 and a -6. It's going to give us a -41n, still bring down that positive 42 that we haven't used. And on the left side as well, bring down that -5n and the plus 6. It's still greater than or equal to. Combining is done. Focusing on the variables now. Got to get all the variables onto one side. So I'm going to choose to cancel on my right. I want to add the 41n, and I'll add the same 41n to my other side. So check it out. When we combine those like terms, we're going to do that -5 plus your 41. That comes out with a 36n. Bring down the plus 6. Bring down the greater than or equal to. Notice the variables on the right canceled just as we wanted. And the positive 42 comes down. Variables are taken care of. Here's your two-step equation now to get that adding or subtracting taken care of. So the positive 6 constant needs to cancel. We'll subtract 6 from one side and subtract 6 from the other side. So 36n is greater than or equal to 36 after you do that arithmetic. Then lastly, to multiply or divide to cancel out your coefficient. My coefficient of 36 has invisible multiplication with n. You know the drill. We're going to divide by 36, and what you divide on one side, divide the same on the other. So we've canceled to leave that n. Notice divided by a positive 36 on both sides, so my inequality symbol stays the same, still a greater than or equal to. And 36 divided by 36 gets us 1. Here's our solution. N is greater than or equal to 1. And plot that on a number line for you. 1, 2, 3, and to the other side I'll have a 0 and a -1. Anytime that my inequality has a equal to option with it, I'm going to have that filled in point, closed point. We are including the value, and in this case is greater than or equal to 1, so values that are greater than 1 would be 2, 3, 4 things to the right. So if I want to go ahead and represent this in the interval notation, we'll have to start on the left of the number line. What's the farthest to the left that we're representing? That's the value 1. It's a closed point, so I get a boxy bracket around it. Put your comma and tell us how far to the right that shading goes. Arrowheads to the right take me to positive infinity. Curvy infinities always get curvy parentheses. When you go ahead and convert this into set builder notation now, get your curly braces set up for it. Introduce the variable, and then vertical bar that says we're done with the introductions. Here's the solution. Take your solution and fill it in. N is greater than or equal to 1. Hope that you're feeling a lot more confident now with these multi-step inequalities. Have a fabulous day.